The golden child impregnated his elder brother's wife and made his life a living hell. Now that their parents have cut him off and bequeathed their $2 million to the elder brother, he's shamelessly coming back for support. Well, honey, you know how I am with my morning coffee on the front porch. I see everything that goes on around here. It's not being nosy, it's being observant. There's a difference, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The Thompson boys, Marcus and little Danny, lived in that big colonial house with the blue shutters, 3 doors down from me. Their parents, Robert and Linda, seemed like decent folks on the surface. Robert worked in finance, always leaving early in his press suits, and Linda had that particular way about her that set my teeth on edge from day one. Now, I've raised 4 children of my own, so I know a thing or two about sibling dynamics. But what I witnessed in that household over the years, child, that was something else entirely. Marcus was the older boy, quiet, studious type who'd wave politely when he saw me tending my roses. Reminded me of my own Tommy at that age, always with his nose in a book. But Danny? That child was trouble with a capital T from the moment he could walk. I'd see him throwing rocks at the neighbor's cat, pulling up Mrs. Henderson's prize tulips, and causing all sorts of mischief. The thing that really got to me was how Linda would just smile and wave it off. Boys will be boys, she'd say with that saccharine laugh of hers. Meanwhile, poor Marcus couldn't so much as track mud on the porch without getting a lecture. I remember one particular incident when the boys were maybe 10 and 8. I was watering my petunias when I heard this god-awful screaming coming from their backyard. Rushed over to my fence to see what was happening, and there was Marcus, soaking wet and crying, while Danny stood there with the garden hose, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. When Linda came running out, you know what she said. "Oh, Danny, you silly goose." "Marcus, honey, why don't you go inside and change?" Boys, they just love their water games. Water games. I wanted to march right over there and give that woman a piece of my mind, but Harold, God rest his soul, he always said to mind our own business unless someone was in real danger. As the years went on, the pattern became clearer than my grandmother's crystal. Danny could do no wrong and Marcus could do no right. I'd see Marcus walking to school alone while Danny got driven by his mother. I'd watch Marcus doing yard work on weekends while Danny played video games inside. The breaking point came when Marcus was about 16. I was pruning my hedge when I heard Robert's voice booming across their yard, and honey, that man never raised his voice. Turned out Danny had been bullying Marcus at school, actually encouraging other kids to pick on his own brother. Can you imagine? That was the first time I saw Robert really stand up for Marcus. Threatened to call the police if Danny didn't shape up. Linda was beside herself, crying about her baby boy and how Robert was being too harsh. But Robert held firm, and I respected him for that. Marcus started going to some kind of martial arts classes after that. I'd see him walking back from the gym, looking a little taller each week. Good for him, I thought. That boy needed to learn to stand up for himself. The real drama started when Danny tried to steal money from Marcus. I happened to be coming back from the grocery store when I saw the whole thing unfold on their driveway. Marcus caught Danny red-handed, and honey, the confrontation that followed was something to behold. Marcus hauled off and punched that boy so hard, Danny hit the ground like a sack of potatoes. Then Marcus calmly took his money back and walked away. Danny started wailing like a banshee, and here comes Linda running out like her hair was on fire. She started yelling at Marcus about being violent, but Robert, bless that man, he shut that down real quick. Told Linda that anyone else would have called the cops on Danny for theft. The boy was lucky all he got was a punch. From my porch, I wanted to applaud. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, and Marcus had finally learned that lesson. When Marcus left for college, I swear the whole neighborhood felt lighter. That boy had been carrying such a heavy burden, and seeing him drive away with his car packed full of hope, it warmed this old heart. He came back during breaks, usually with this sweet girl named Sarah. Pretty little thing with kind eyes and a gentle smile. They'd wave when they walked by, and I could see how happy Marcus was. Finally, someone who appreciated that boy for who he was. Danny, meanwhile, was still causing trouble around the neighborhood. I caught him toilet papering the Mitchell's house one Halloween, and when I told Linda, she just laughed it off. Young men need to sow their wild oats, she said. Wild oats, my foot. That boy needed discipline, not excuses. When Marcus and Sarah got married right after graduation, it was a small ceremony at the local church. I wasn't invited. Why would I be? But I saw the photos Linda was showing around the neighborhood. Beautiful couple, they were. Sarah was already showing a little bump, and while some folks might have whispered, I thought it was sweet. Sometimes love just can't wait for all the proper timing. They moved into a little starter home about 20 minutes away, but Marcus would still visit his parents regularly. I'd see him pull up in his sensible sedan, sometimes with Sarah and later with their baby boy, little Thomas. That child was the spitting image of Marcus. Same serious eyes, same thoughtful expression. I'd watch from my window as Marcus pushed the stroller around the block, such a devoted father. Made my heart happy to see him so content. Now, I don't mean to speak ill of the departed, but Sarah, well, there were things that didn't sit right with me over the years. I'd see her coming and going at odd hours sometimes, dressed a little too nice for grocery shopping, if you know what I mean. And there was that time I saw her having coffee with some man at Rosie's diner downtown. Handsome fellow, not Marcus. They were sitting awful close for two people just having a friendly chat. But who was I to say anything? Maybe he was a coworker or an old friend. Still, it nagged at me. Call it a grandmother's intuition, but something felt off. The first real crack in their marriage came about 4 years in. Marcus showed up at his parents' house one day, looking like death warmed over. I was deadheading my roses when I saw him sitting on their front steps, head in his hands. Robert came out, and they talked for what felt like hours. Later, through the neighborhood grapevine and honey, in a place like this, news travels faster than wildfire. I heard that Sarah had been having an affair with someone from her work. Married man, no less. But Marcus, being Marcus, decided to forgive her and work things out. For the sake of little Thomas, Linda told Mrs. Patterson, who told Mrs. Chin, who told me. You'd think one affair would be enough to teach a woman some sense, but apparently not. About 2 years later, the same thing happened again. This time it was some ex-boyfriend from her high school days. Marcus found out when she went to visit family for a week and someone saw her with this other man. I remember the day Marcus moved back in with his parents temporarily. Watched him carry suitcase after suitcase up to his old room while little Thomas played in the yard, oblivious to his parents' troubles. That poor child, caught in the middle of all this mess. But once again, Marcus forgave her. Took her back, tried to rebuild their family. I admired his commitment, I really did, but part of me wanted to shake some sense into that boy. Once is a mistake, twice is a pattern, and patterns don't usually change without serious intervention. Everything changed 3 months ago. I'll never forget that day as long as I live. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was having my coffee when I saw Marcus's car pull up to his parents' house. But instead of his usual calm demeanor, he looked like a man possessed. Stormed into that house like the devil himself was chasing him. About an hour later, I heard shouting. Real shouting, not just raised voices. Then I saw Linda come running out to her car and speed off toward town. Something big was happening, but I couldn't make heads or tails of it. It wasn't until later that evening, when Mrs. Patterson called with the most shocking news I'd ever heard, that the whole sordid story came out. Sarah hadn't just been having another affair. She'd been sleeping with Danny, Marcus's own brother. And little Thomas, sweet, innocent Thomas, who looked so much like Marcus, might not be Marcus's son at all. I dropped my coffee cup right there on the kitchen floor. 37 years in this neighborhood, and I'd never heard anything so scandalous, so downright wrong. How could a woman do that to her husband? How could a brother betray his own flesh and blood like that? Marcus, bless him, handled the whole thing with more grace than I would have. He demanded a paternity test, filed for divorce, and cut all ties with Sarah. When the test results came back confirming that Danny was indeed Thomas's father, I watched that poor man's world completely crumble. But the real fireworks happened when Marcus confronted Danny in front of their parents. I wasn't there, of course, but Linda's sister Diane was, and she told the whole story to anyone who'd listen. Apparently, Marcus called Danny while Robert and Linda listened on speakerphone. Started off denying everything that boy did, but when faced with the evidence, Danny's true colors came shining through. Called Sarah all sorts of names, blamed her for seducing him, said it wasn't his fault that women found him attractive. The arrogance of that child. Even caught red-handed, he couldn't take responsibility for his actions. Robert was so disgusted he cut Danny off financially right then and there. College fund, monthly allowance, everything. Gone. And Linda. Poor Linda finally saw her precious baby boy for what he really was. The divorce went through quickly enough. Sarah tried to get alimony, but with all the evidence of her affair, she didn't have a leg to stand on. Marcus got to keep most of his assets, which was only fair considering what he'd been put through. The hardest part was watching Marcus struggle with losing Thomas. That man had raised that boy for 6 years, thinking he was his son. The pain of that discovery, well, I can't even imagine. Some wounds cut too deep for words. Danny tried reaching out to the family after he got cut off, but Robert wouldn't hear of it. Changed the locks, wouldn't take his calls, nothing. When Danny showed up at their door begging for forgiveness, Robert told him to get off his property before he called the police. Even Linda, who defended that boy his whole life, couldn't stomach what he'd done. I saw her crying in her garden one day, and my heart just broke for her. Sometimes the hardest thing about being a parent is accepting that you've raised a monster. 2 weeks ago, Robert made a decision that shocked everyone. He called Marcus over and told him he was changing his will. Everything, the house, the investments, the life insurance, all of it, would go to Marcus. Danny would get exactly $1 just to make it legal. Now, I don't know how Danny found out about this, but somehow he did. My money's on Linda having a moment of weakness and telling him, though she'd deny it till her dying day. Danny called Marcus, crying and begging for help. Said he was struggling in college, that Sarah was demanding child support, that he couldn't find work. Wanted Marcus to talk to their parents, to help him get back in their good graces. The audacity of that boy. After everything he'd done, he had the nerve to ask his victim for help. Marcus told him exactly what I would have told him, that he was no longer his brother, that Danny made his bed and now he could lie in it. Hung up on him and blocked his number. But here's where the story takes a turn that still gives me chills, honey. Life has a way of serving up justice in the most unexpected ways. About a month after that final phone call, Danny and Sarah were driving back from some court hearing about child support. They'd been arguing in the car. Neighbors heard them shouting even with the windows up. Danny was driving recklessly, trying to make some point about how unfair his life had become. He ran a red light going 50 in a 35 zone. T-boned by a delivery truck. Sarah died instantly. Danny survived, but barely. Traumatic brain injury, paralyzed from the waist down, needed round-the-clock care. The kind of care that costs more money than a part-time mechanic could ever hope to make. And little Thomas? That sweet child was in the back seat. Physically unharmed, thank the Lord, but now orphaned with nowhere to go. When the hospital called Robert and Linda about the accident, I watched from my window as they rushed out to their car. Linda was sobbing, Robert's face was stone cold. They stayed at the hospital for days. But here's the thing that really gets me, Marcus showed up too. Not for Danny, mind you, but for Thomas. Despite everything, despite knowing that boy wasn't his biological son, Marcus couldn't stand the thought of him being alone and scared in a hospital. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Danny, who'd spent his whole life being the golden child, was now completely dependent on the very family he'd betrayed. And Marcus, who'd been cast aside and mistreated for years, was the only one with the financial means and emotional strength to help. The state wanted to put Thomas in foster care, but Marcus stepped up. Filed for custody, went through all the legal hoops, took that boy in like he was his own flesh and blood. Because, in every way that mattered, he was. Danny's medical bills were astronomical. The insurance covered some of it, but long-term care for someone in his condition? That's a lifetime of expenses. And since he'd burned every bridge with his family, there was no one left to help him. Well, almost no one. In a twist that would make Shakespeare weep, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. He agreed to pay for Danny's care, not out of love or forgiveness, but because, as he told his parents, I won't become the monster he was. But there were conditions. Danny would be placed in a state-run facility, not some fancy private place. He'd get basic care, nothing more. And Marcus would never visit, never acknowledge him as family again. The payments would be made through lawyers, cold and impersonal as a business transaction. Danny's cognitive function was damaged enough that he couldn't fully understand the irony of his situation, that the brother he'd tormented and betrayed was now the one keeping him alive. Some might call that mercy. Others might call it the perfect revenge. Robert and Linda visit Danny once a month, more out of obligation than love. Linda aged 10 years in the months after the accident. The guilt of enabling Danny his whole life, of ignoring Marcus's suffering, of creating the very monster who destroyed their family, it's eating her alive. Robert changed his will as planned. Marcus inherited everything when Robert passed suddenly of a heart attack 6 months later. The stress of it all just wore that poor man down. Linda moved into a small apartment closer to the care facility, using her inheritance to maintain a modest lifestyle. Marcus kept the family home and moved in with Thomas, now officially adopted and going by Thomas Thompson. I see them sometimes, working in the garden that Robert used to tend, and it's like watching healing in real time. As I sit here on my porch this evening, watching Marcus teach Thomas how to ride a bicycle in the very driveway where so much pain and drama unfolded, I can't help but reflect on the lessons this whole saga taught our little neighborhood. You see, honey, life has a way of coming full circle. The boy who was overlooked and mistreated became the man who rose above it all. The golden child who could do no wrong ended up losing everything that mattered. And sometimes, just sometimes, the meek really do inherit the earth. Marcus never remarried, never had biological children of his own. But watching him with Thomas, you'd never know they didn't share blood. Love isn't about DNA. It's about showing up, day after day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The neighborhood has never been quite the same since the accident. There's a soberness here now, a recognition that the facades we maintain can hide the deepest dysfunctions. We all thought we knew the Thompson family, but we only saw what they wanted us to see. Mrs. Patterson still brings me the occasional bit of gossip, but it feels different now. Less entertaining, more tragic. Because we learned that some stories don't have happy endings for everyone involved. Sometimes justice looks a lot more like consequences than closure. Linda comes by sometimes, walking slowly past the old house where Marcus and Thomas now live. She stops and stares, and I wonder what she's thinking. Is she remembering the little boys who used to play in that yard? Is she regretting all the times she chose the wrong son to defend? Or is she just hoping for a glimpse of the grandchild she lost the right to claim? Marcus always waves politely when he sees her, but he doesn't invite her in. Thomas doesn't know who she is. To him, she's just the sad lady who walks by sometimes. Maybe that's for the best. These days, I find myself paying more attention to the families around here. The Johnsons next door with their twin boys. I watch how they handle sibling rivalry, hoping they've learned something from the Thompson tragedy. The new family that moved into the Hendersons' old place, young couple with a baby on the way, I see how they look at each other and pray they remember to keep looking that way when life gets hard. Because that's the thing about living in a neighborhood like this, honey. We're all connected, whether we want to be or not. The dramas that play out behind closed doors have a way of rippling outward, touching all of us in ways we don't always recognize. I've seen 4 decades of families come and go on Maple Street. I've watched children grow up, marriages bloom and wither, dreams fulfilled and shattered. But the Thompson story will stay with me until I draw my last breath, because it showed me something fundamental about human nature. We all have the capacity for both great good and terrible evil. The difference lies in the choices we make when no one is watching, when we think the consequences won't catch up to us, when we believe our actions won't matter in the grand scheme of things. Danny thought he could take whatever he wanted without paying the price. Sarah thought she could live a double life without it destroying her family. Linda thought she could play favorites without damaging her children. They were all wrong, and the payment came due in ways none of them could have imagined. But Marcus? Marcus chose differently at every turn. He chose forgiveness when he could have chosen revenge. He chose responsibility when he could have walked away. He chose love when he could have chosen bitterness. And in the end, those choices saved not just him, but the innocent child caught in the crossfire of other people's sins. As the sun sets on another day in our quiet little neighborhood, I pull my shawl tighter and think about the letters I should write to my own grandchildren. Not about scandals or gossip, but about the importance of character, of treating people with kindness, of understanding that every action has consequences that ripple far beyond what we can see. The Thompson house glows warmly in the evening light, and I can see Marcus helping Thomas with homework at the kitchen table. It's a peaceful scene, hard won and precious. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and very wise, the children we choose to love become the greatest blessing of all.